Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us as we tape another segment of Chicago Lawyer Magazine's Inside Out, an examination of various aspects of the law from the unique perspective of our husband and wife team. The inside view comes from Associate General Counsel at National Material LP, David Susler, and the outside view from Tina Martini, a partner at DLA Piper here in Chicago. I'm Andy Shaw, President and CEO of the Better Government Association, and your host for these segments. Today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart as a CEO of an organization, hiring for success. And I can't wait for these answers because I've hired and let go a number of people over the years, and I think that's one of the trickiest things in the entire business enterprise, us as a nonprofit and you in the legal field. So tell me from your perspectives what you can do to not ensure, but to at least increase the likelihood that you're hiring for success, because there's no way to ensure it. You're going to get bad apples that you don't know about along the way. But what are some not tricks of the trade, but what are some important components to think about as you try to maximize the likelihood of successful hires, either way?
Well, I would say first and foremost, you have to have clarity as to what exactly you're looking for. And for example, in a law firm, if you're looking to hire for an associate, for example, into your practice group, I would say first and foremost, you need to have consensus, or at least something resembling consensus as to what folks are looking for. Because if you don't have alignment between what you're looking for and what you go out to the market and get, that's where you end up having issues. I've also noticed issues when you actually go through the interviewing process and then folks end up getting pretty frustrated if there are many interviews that are had and you can't necessarily find the right person. People start getting willing to negotiate away certain things, and they're willing to give up certain things. And I would say you have to be really clear and pretty determined to find what it is you think is necessary in terms of qualities and characteristics of somebody. I would also say don't go and hire somebody just because you really enjoy hanging out with them during the interview. You have to go in with very strategic, difficult questions. Don't go to interview questions 101 on the internet and pull the run-of-the-mill questions that most people ask during an interview. If you're trying to determine how well somebody is going to be able to fit in an environment where they're going to have to think creatively, think on their feet, have to be a good writer and so forth, I think you need to create an interviewing environment that really tests for those things.
Yeah, you need to understand, and similar to what Tina said, you need to understand not only the position you're hiring, but also you have to start with your organization. Understand your culture, understand the work dynamic in your office place, and again, understand what it is you're looking for, a particular skill set, type of career path. Are you looking for a specialist to plug into a specific need and you want them to stay in that role forever? It's a real niche player. Or are you looking for somebody who has a specific skill set today but has a broader substance with which they can grow and expand? So it's the specific intelligence and expertise along with emotional intelligence and leadership capabilities so that they can grow. You have to be very clear on that.
Do you need to follow like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 approach in terms of steps for hiring, or is it just important that you cover the components Tina talked about? In other words, making sure that you simulate some of the situations the person may be in, or more importantly, challenge them and get beyond the social conversation?
Well, I kind of like the idea of behavioral interviewing, some call it. I generally, especially when hiring for a lawyer or a more senior management position, I look for emotional intelligence in somebody. I think I write about in the column, my favorite interview I think I ever had was at a prior company. I was being hired for a litigation position. Even though I was in-house, I was going to be trying cases. So the person hiring me, about 45 minutes in the interview, pulled out 3 briefs from a Ninth Circuit appellate case and said, read these, I'm going to be back in 30 minutes, and then you're going to argue these to me as if I'm the judge, because he wanted to know if I had the skill set to represent him in court. And then he came back, and for an hour, I argued like I was in court.
Did you get the job?
I walked out 3 hours later with a job.
Well, I was going to say, you didn't get the job, so now you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
You got that. Sounds good. You were ready.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
About that interview that he had, I thought was crazy.
Is it a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 approach to interviewing for hiring, or is it more making sure that you go way beyond the social niceties?
I think that there's a methodology. I'm a process person, so I always love to see a methodology or a process in whatever it is that you're doing. But at the same time, so I would say that yes, there's certain things you need to check off as part of the process, and that there's something you start with, there's a cadence to it. You begin with a certain step of, the person has to have certain credentials walking in, then it goes into an interview, then you ask them certain types of questions and so forth. But I'm also a very big believer in behavioral interviewing, and I think it goes beyond just certain types of questions you ask. I think we just as a society, when we're interviewing people, could do a much better job of tuning into people's body language, not just to the things they say, but to the things they don't say, how they answer certain questions. Do they get sort of fidgety? Do they get uncomfortable? That sort of thing. I think oftentimes people dismiss that sort of thing and say, oh, well, they're really nervous, or oh, they're not really good at interviewing. And I think all of these things are clues to whether somebody is a good fit. And if they're overly nervous, depending on the position, for example, that may not be a good fit. Like if you're looking for someone to be a trial lawyer, or someone who's supposed to handle very difficult situations, you don't want somebody who in the course of a relatively run-of-the-mill interview to get so incredibly nervous that they can't function through the interview. So I think that it's a holistic process consisting of certain steps and consisting also of being really attuned to the person that you're interviewing.
And I think since you're asking a little bit about process, I think it's also important. Most interviewing is, the candidates are going to interview with multiple people at the company or the law firm. I think it's important that the interviewers talk before as well as after. It's always good if your interviewers are trained. So
to get at different things. Yeah.
You have to get at different things. You also need to make sure that candidates all need to be asked a certain number of identical questions. So you have some apples to apples comparisons. And then you go off of that to find out about the individual to separate one from the other.
One final question requires a one-word answer from each of you, and that would be this. How many times over the course of your career of participating in an interviewing process have you actually been misled by somebody who turned out to totally misrepresent themselves in an interview and was unable to deliver anything resembling what you wanted on the actual job? I say that because it's happened to me several times in the hiring process, not malicious, but people who they look like they were world beaters, and when they got on the job they were duds. I mean, so did that ever happen? Does that happen to anybody?
I can think of two right off the top of my head.
Okay, I won't ask you to name them.
Yeah.
Because that could be actionable.
Right.
I would say several times.
Yeah.
Where someone just misrepresented what they had done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's hard to, how do you call someone on that until they get on the job and they actually don't perform?
Yeah, especially when the information given on references is so limited because people can say so little about other people without violating certain principles. Right. Anyway, I think that's just the moral of the story, is that you can do your best and try your hardest, but it's not a precise science, and you can end up with lemons even when you think you're getting lemonade.
Right. Well, and it's not always misrepresented, because I've had that with somebody who just completely misrepresented their skill set, which becomes apparent once they start working. But the other is sometimes, the other person I can think of, great interview, has all the substantive skill set, but then when they show up, there's no delivery.
And I can name a couple too, but I won't by name.
Right. So that happens.
Okay, hiring for success with an asterisk basically says it ain't always going to happen.
Right.
David Susler, Tina Martini, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us in this segment of Chicago Lawyer Magazine's Inside Out. I'm Andy Shaw. Join us next month when we'll talk about living your life outside of your comfort zone, which means you have to not freak out, but you have to deal with some unusual circumstances. Tune back in. We'll see you then.